Thank you for coming out on a cold night. I think we're in for a treat. We'll see Carol, and then we'll have Affonso Gonçalves, the editor, being interviewed by Michael Taylor.
We have this wonderful man who I've known for almost 2 decades, it seems. He was my editing teacher a long time ago when I decided to become an editor. I don't know how much you know about Affonso, but he's cut all of the recent Todd Haynes movies. This one, before that was Mildred Pierce, the miniseries, more recently May December, the Velvet Underground documentary. He also works largely with Jim Jarmusch. I believe you have another one coming out with Jim Jarmusch.
Yeah, I have another one.
Works with Maggie Gyllenhaal, The Lost Daughter, The Bride coming up, which you're working on with Dylan Tickner, who's been our guest this year, and many other wonderful filmmakers. Ira Sachs, go all the way back to Ira's first film, The Delta, 40 Shades of Blue, Love is Strange, which I was fortunate to collaborate on with Fonzie, and I learned that was the second time he came in as my editing teacher. So I have lots of questions for you. One thing I was wondering about is I've seen this movie many times. I love it. I love the visual compositions, the music, and the editing rhythms. And it's quite spare in terms of dialogue. And having not read Todd's script, I don't know what the original script was like. So much of the movie is told visually. What was your approach then? How did you work on that? Did that come through the editing, or what sort of process led to that?
No, first of all, thank you for having me here, and also I just want to give a shout out to you that you have another connection to the film because Judy Becker, your wife, was an amazing production designer in the movie.
She did, thank you. And
yeah.
If you guys are in New York right now, you can go see her movie, The Brutalist, playing in 70 millimeter. I recommend it. And just this afternoon, they showed Brokeback Mountain right before this, which is another of Judy's films. So it's been a big weekend for her. But congrats also to Fonzie. I don't know how you managed to work with so many different great filmmakers all at the same time.
I have no idea.
But you must be very, very busy. I don't know who keeps your calendar. But going back to the cutting of this and use of visuals over dialogue.
I mean, I think just the way it's the way Todd and Ed designed. It was designed to be that way. I mean, the script is, I think, naturally is not a very verbose script. But when we were cutting, and what I often did, I cut the film with no sound because I think it is a film that lends itself to be just. You can cut just through the eyes. I've watched this film many times with no sound. Just watch to see if I can tell the story without the dialogue. Then I would. Then if I can take some of the words out and let them, like the body language and just the connection through that way. And Todd was into that idea too, so that's kind of a lean into that concept to do as much as visual, just the body language. That's we try to do that, and obviously then there's the music, the sound design that helps too.
Yeah, that's
because I mean a lot of the way when I was cutting, the pace because it's kind of a quiet film, slow and. And I was taking the sort of like the pace came from the actors. So, however, I mean, you kind of manipulate a little bit, but I like the way they were reacting to each other. So it's a film less about acting, it's more about reacting, if that makes any sense.
Right, how the two characters feed off of each other.
But actually all the characters, because like that amazing scene between Abby and Therese by when they're having food together, it's like and Therese says, "Why do you hate me so much?" She's like, "I don't hate you," and the way that she keeps avoiding looking at Abby and Abby just clocking her, it's also that you can take anybody in the film, like the way you connect is just by the way they look, by the way the distance between them. It's incredible acting and obviously Todd's directing.
That's great. Thank you. I know we often have other editors who come and aspiring editors, and that's a great technique of just turning off the sound and seeing how much the body movements and facial matters and gestures can convey the story. There's a scene in the film early on, during the drive to New Jersey, the first drive to New Jersey, where it suddenly gets very dreamy, and you've got these sort of close-ups that are coming in and out of focus, and you're hearing words about snow, but it's a little bit out of sync, and it suddenly goes into this very dreamy dreamland, and then goes into a tunnel. And then on the other side of the tunnel, suddenly it's snowing, and we're seeing Carol by a Christmas tree. What was the process of coming up with that whole sequence?
Yeah, that sequence is something that we came up in the cutting room because it's a key moment. Obviously there's a shift. There's the before the tunnel and the after the tunnel. In the script, Therese says, I wish that tunnel went on forever. I'm not sure if she said it. I can't even remember if she actually said those lines. But that was the feel, because that's something that came from the book. In the book, she is even more dramatic. She says, I wish, when they were crossing the tunnel, I wish the tunnel collapsed and we all died together. Like, it's just on point with Therese. But it was hard to convey, because basically when they were shooting that scene specifically, we were shooting Cincinnati, that they couldn't have that. It was an active tunnel, so we could have only shoot that 3 times, 4 times maybe. So they would drive one way, then the car would drive back. But on the drive back, he kept filming, but he just filmed stuff completely, and like he would take the focus, he shift focus. He asked one time to Kate to stay in the car, so he shot that close up. There was off focus, so he was playing around. And when I watched this, it's like, I think that if I do something that's a little more, I hate to use the word poetic, but a little, there's this kind of like, there are layers, a little more dreamy. Then I tried, and then, because the sound goes off, if I remember well, when the car starts moving, already the sound, their dialogue start fading. And then you just, and then the music, there's one music that comes in, and then when they're in the tunnel, Carol turns, and then there's another music, which is actually the music. It's a song that they eventually listen to in the party at the end, just by a different singer. So it's kind of a nod, and then there's a layer of Therese in the car, just a reminder that it's kind of like a flashback within the flashback, and the line. So we had all this stuff, and sort of like shake it all, throw it in, and see what happens. And then you got to the other side, which is that beautiful, when the camera goes to the brightness, and then there was like a long fade to white to get to the other side, to the snow. But there's no other scene in the film with that kind of aesthetic. So, but I thought, Todd liked it, so.
Well, it's a very intense sequence, and it's the kind of thing that cinema can do that music can do occasionally in songs, depending on the way instruments come together. But it's unique, really, to the art of film. You can't have that in literature in the same way. Again, words can be used to convey it, but not in the same fashion. The sound is very interesting in the film, and I know that obviously, on most of the films you do, ultimately you take it and you're involved in the final sound mix and so forth. But while you're just at it, I think you were using, I think I remember the room you cut this in at Goldcrest with Todd, while you're doing the initial work with him, I'm sure you're experimenting with sound levels and different subjective techniques while you're working. And I noticed just this time, again, it's probably at least the 10th time I've seen the film, that scene, I think it's right around where Carol says, around where she's saying, would you come live with me? Suddenly all the sound of the room drops out, but you still have the piano playing, and it's a really nice effect. How did, the music is there, but all the room ambience has dropped out, all the chatter and so forth. How did that come about?
I think it was a little bit the same way we did the car. There was something between so intensely, this connection is so intense between the two that everything kind of disappears and just become the two of them. And it's interesting because it's the moment, with that moment, it's when she says, "I love you," is the exact same moment at the very beginning of the film when the guy comes around. You can actually see Kate saying, "I love you." So it kind of plays too. It's just completely the perspective, just being in that moment, that is completely kind of from the beginning. It's a different intensity. It's just nothing. It's just a little. You just don't know how the moment you just miss is probably the most important moment in the film. But it was just we trying again to play with the sense of also what's interesting there. Rooney had looked away on that because that was the best take. So we actually VFX her eyes staring because it's like she needs to be looking at all times. She can't look away, and she did. So we had to VFX that.
Oh, cool.
Sorry to break the spell here.
Great. Well, she was very good at staring throughout the whole film. I noticed that.
Yes, she was. I mean, she's amazing. She's amazing. She's incredible. I mean, both of them are. But Rooney is so intense, just being very simple the way she do it with such intensity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm always. I think even now you still occasionally work with first and second time, third time. Directors like you've been doing with Maggie Gyllenhaal recently. Obviously, Maggie has a long acting career before her directing career, but I often advise filmmakers to get their actors to calm down a little bit, if possible, to just be quiet and to be still occasionally. For an editor, that's a gift to have stillness, because you.
Wait, you actually say that to directors, to tell that to actors?
Yeah, all the time.
I don't know if I recommend this, but I wouldn't do that.
This is probably why your directors rehire you so many times. I'm taken by the stillness in this film. And I have to admit, I am influenced by Judy's most recent work, because watching like The Brutalist, for instance, you see there are these moments where Guy Pearce, who I've had in other films, I've worked with him and I've seen him in other movies, but in The Brutalist, he's just incredibly still at times, for like what appears to be like a minute, just this stare. And it's breathtaking when it works. And of course, it's Brady Corbet's third film, but he also comes from acting. Well, we'll get back to some other aspects of your career in a little bit, if that's all right. But I'm also curious about the ending of the film, which is so key and also without words. And there's the beautiful camera moves that take us towards the table that Carol is at. And then in the end, I know the camera's pulling away from Rooney, but it's still pushing in on her. I'm not sure how many angles you had to work with initially in that scene, or just how that came about, but it's so perfect in its simplicity.
Even if you had many angles, I think once you watch, it's basically however the performance is going to be, that's the shot I'm going to use, and then you kind of work around it. And because the one thing that kind of bumps me a little bit, but that's me, and this is for the filmmakers in the room. It's slightly the eye line is slightly off. And I kept cutting. It's like, is this on? This scene I cut probably like 30 times. Is like, are they looking at each other, or they're not looking at each other? So it's just over my mind. And they are looking at each other, but maybe they're not. I don't know. But anyway, the perfect timing, and if you look at Teresa's mouth, it's like, is she smiling or she's not smiling? But if you look at her eyes, yes, she is. But everything is so subtle. Mm-hmm. And then but you have to come in just at the right time, and you have to leave just at the right time, because if you pass it, if it's too much, then it becomes too much, So we did it over and over again, be like, is this right? And then once we got the music from Carter, I mean, he sent it to the cut, but we kind of adjust a little bit. Then I felt like it worked. I thought
it's very tricky also, because you don't want Carol to notice her initially. I mean, you don't, presumably. Mm-hmm. It's like, so you both want to see that first moment of Carol noticing that she's come back, and then also telegraphing her happiness without it being a huge big smile or anything like that. And that all happens in that one last shot.
Yeah.
Just a slight, because you've got her looking at her other friends. I was wondering, in a film like this, how you handle some of the supporting, more secondary characters. I'm not just thinking of Abby and her, would-be boyfriend, but like the private eye who's following them, who we first meet when she's getting ice. Something like that could be tricky in a film like this. It has its sort of mystery thriller elements, like in terms of tipping your hand. Like, when you were editing a scene like that, was there a way to sort of help convey that this really is a casual encounter, a stranger at a motel? Or, because we weren't meeting too many other people along the road.
Again, Todd is so specific the way he directed the actors that is not, it wasn't like, it wasn't anything, you have to give, of course you have to be aware. What we did do was actually, there were more scenes. And then if you have an extra scene, because they break down, they leave the hotel, they meet Tommy, and then they leave the hotel and then the car breaks down. And then Tommy shows up to change. Then it becomes like, that's a little too convenient that this guy is going the exact same time as in the same road. And you felt like, that's when you felt like you tipping your hand. So you can kind of like, you think about that way. It's like in the long, you were aware when it's happening, is this too much? But the way Corey was doing it, he wasn't really giving that much away. But the scene in the roadside when they break down, it was like borderline. It's like, this is, it could have been too much. Sarah is incredible. There's a really amazing scene in the movie that is not in the movie. We had to cut it out. But before they go on the road, Therese comes to Carol's house. They spend the night. So in the morning, she's in the kitchen. It's Therese and Abby, and they're making sandwiches. And Abby's throwing like some deep shade to Therese and says like, she's going through a lot of shit. Don't hurt her. If something happens, it's on you. And that's one of the reasons. But it was too much. It was too heavy. It tilted the moment. We said too much. But that's the reason why when Abby comes pick her up and Therese says, "Why do you hate me so much?" She's also referring to something that the audience didn't see. But I thought their presence alone and the fact that she's there and it's better to tell the story that way by not saying much, but actually you can connect the dots.
Well, that can sort of create a kind of electricity. Or you get the feeling that Therese is simply just picking this up from her own body language, even though she does seem to be doing this nice thing of driving her home.
But then the same token, we have a scene that it's with not our main characters. There's a scene with Abby and with Harj. And it's like, in theory, it's like, why does this scene exist in this movie? There's not about either one of them. But that scene is so important. And the way that, and Sarah that's probably it's not my favorite scene in the film, but it's one of my favorites, just because the intensity of like, both of them love this woman so much, who loves someone else, and they suffered, they went through, but there's like so much in it that kind of also informs the way Kate is and the way Carrie is, the whole film, the way the film is. So, but again, it's Todd.
It makes me wish we could have had a scene with the two of them and her boyfriend together at some round table commiserating.
Two of whom? Who?
Abby, Carol's husband, and Therese's boyfriend commiserating over their lost love.
There was that.
Is that an omitted scene? No. We're going to open up for questions in just a second, but I have one more, if you don't mind. Were there, you do have to lose, favorite scenes sometimes for time or for storytelling, like you've just mentioned, or you mentioned the one. Is there anything else? I know it's been a while since you did this film that you remember, I love this moment or this scene, but it wasn't right for the movie.
I mean, the scene with Abby and Therese, I love that scene.
Yeah.
It was, we debated keeping it, but it was like, this is never gonna. There's a lot of scenes with Richard and Therese. We meet the family. there's more discussion with Richard. There's a whole character at Frankenberg's in the beginning that Therese realized, like, oh my God, I'm gonna be like this older woman that she meets, and that starts like her decision to become a photographer. It's like I have to do something else in my life. There's a great scene with Danny on the bridge that we had. So those were really good scenes, but it just didn't fit.
Do we have any questions from the audience? DeWitt's here with a mic, which he can bring to you if you've got one.
Hi, Affonso. Oh, this is loud. I'm so glad to be speaking to you from this distance. My question, I was wondering, given that, Therese is a photographer, and I think it can sometimes be your first inclination, did you experiment with using stills or freeze frames, and how did you go about, I guess, not integrating that?
To answer your question, no, we did not. We didn't experience. Maybe when that scene when she was first photographing Carol, but it just didn't seem right to do that, to actually use freeze frame in the film. I think I may have tried, as a matter of fact, but there wasn't something that Todd wanted to do. The thing is, in the book, she's actually she does production design for theater, and there's interesting. There's something in the film that I realized when I watched it again. Then that maybe it was like a remnant from the book, because when they go to the hotel, she goes to the drapes. It's like, oh, this drapes is so beautiful. I was like, what is that reference? In my mind, it's like maybe this is actually, maybe I may be wrong, but just that maybe that's a reference to the fact that she used to be, originally in the book, she was a theater. She wanted to be aspired theater designer. But yeah, we didn't, eventually Todd, I don't think Todd would ever wanted to use the stills.
Thank you.
Hi. So I noticed there's a lot of the movie that is sort of, it feels like it's Therese watching her, and we're watching through Therese's eyes, like when she, pretty much every scene with the two of them. But then there's some scenes where Therese can't see what's going on, right? So scenes where the lawyers are fighting, and Therese isn't even there. And obviously in the scenes where Therese is looking at her, she's in love with her. And so the perspective of her is, I thought I knew how beautiful Cate Blanchett was, but wow. And so I was wondering whether it was through sort of Therese's eyes for the audience, or outside of Therese's perspective, if that affected sort of your approach to the editing.
One time Todd was asked the question, why is the film called Carol? And he said, because Carol is actually the object of Therese's desire. So it is, in that sense, it is Therese's desire towards Carol that the film just goes around, because it's not just because it's about Carol. It is through Therese's eyes, sometimes it's through Carol's eyes, and the way it's shot, you see it, you don't see it. But whenever I try to track the story by looks as much as I could, and so you can be in one of the perspectives. Or none. So I was just going to say something, because this is unique to Todd, the way Todd works, the way we do usually. It's kind of a fascinating thing. So Todd was shooting in Cincinnati, I was in New York. We get the footage, and then he finished the film. I had a full assembly of the film, and then Todd takes 2 weeks off. He usually go to Hawaii. Anyway, takes 2 weeks in Hawaii, comes back, and then he sits by himself with DVDs, with burned DVDs. He watches the entire film by himself. He take notes, really, really detailed notes. They'd be like, okay, the scene in the restaurant. You're gonna use, 54B, take 5 on Carol. She's gonna say those lines, and Therese is like, "What's your name?" Therese Belivet. It's gonna be on. So he gives me. So there's a full cut that I did, and then there's a full cut that Todd did based on his paper cuts. And then when we start cutting, we use his cut, and then when he's done, we watch my cut, and then he'd be like, "Oh, you did this way. And then there's a hybrid cut. And then there's a final cut that has neither mine nor his, is the cut. But it's just a curious, because nobody does that way. This is a very, very unique to Todd. Anyway.
Sorry about that. That's That's very helpful to know. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.
And we'll see you back here next year. Thank you, Fonzie, and good luck with your current projects.